Welcome to today's webinar, Maximize Your Tech Investment by Hosting MIP in the Cloud. My name is Kim Fellman, and I'm a marketing coordinator at JMT Consulting. I'll be your moderator today, and I'm excited to be hosting this session. This webinar is brought to you by JMT Consulting. We are financial management solution specialists for nonprofits, and we have nearly 30 years of experience helping nonprofits with technology and business processes for the back office. And that is exactly why we are covering this topic today. JMT understands that it can be daunting to make changes to your software, and we are excited to show you the options JMT has for migrating to the cloud safely, affordably, and with as little discomfort as possible. Before we kick things off today, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. First, today's webinar will be recorded and will be emailed to you for on-demand access along with the slides. And next, we would love to hear from you during today's presentation. So if you have a question, please feel free to send it through the Q&A tab at the bottom of your control panel. And we will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we will answer all of your questions. I'd like to get us started by welcoming our speakers. Joining us today is Tom Thornton and Dan Wharton. I'll go ahead and pass the mic over to them to introduce themselves and get us started.
Thank you, Kim. So today's presentation is all about cloud hosting. Across the globe, COVID-19 forced a lot of nonprofits to rethink how their finance teams operate. Those nonprofits with updated technology and cloud access had fewer disruptions when forced to work remotely. JMT does understand that it can be daunting to make significant changes to your software, whether out of fear of taking resources out of the mission, or knowing about better options and not being able to make it happen. Your fears and concerns are heard, and JMT has worked hard to bring you options that help reduce risk and offer flexible pricing. Today, we're going to learn how to maximize the investment you've made in your technology by migrating to the cloud. Using JMT's cloud hosting provider, Ace Cloud Hosting, we're going to show you how cloud migration options and how to lay out the least disruptive plan for migrating MIP software into the cloud. Before we get started, as Kim mentioned, we are recording today's webinar, and we'll get that out to you in the next 24 hours. You'll have on-demand access along with a copy of the slide deck. Of course, we want to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to send it through the Q&A tab at the bottom. We'll be answering all your questions at the end of the session. Today's presentation should take about 40-ish minutes to deliver, and then that should give us plenty of time to speak directly with the audience at the end. All right, let's jump in. We're going to start off with a few introductions. You'll meet today's presenters and look at how JMT has grown over the years. Then we'll deep dive into cloud hosting, when is it a good time to migrate, why should you migrate, and how to choose the proper service provider, not necessarily in that order. We'll end the call with questions from the audience. My name is Dan Wharton, and I manage roughly 350-ish active client accounts across the U.S. and overseas. I actually started my nonprofit career with Abdullah. The distinguished gentleman to my right is Mr. Tom Thornton. He is JMT's Chief Operating Officer and best tennis player I know. He's been working with MIP for over 20 years, having served in mid-level management roles, services, sales, product management. But to be fair, he is the only tennis player I know. But I will say I'm too scared to play him in ping pong. Anyway, between the two of us, we have a combined 30 years experience with MIP, and we're happy to share our experiences with you today. To tell a good story, one should have perspective. JMT Consulting has been around 27 years, and with 27 years experience, specifically in the not-for-profit sector. As JMT has grown over the years, so has our ability to support each client promptly and with personal care. We have the trust of thousands of nonprofits and strive to offer the care, expertise, and innovation that attract customers for life. JMT Consulting is MIP's largest partner, not just in volume, but also in size. Today's presentation focuses on MIP fund accounting, but we want you to know that there are plenty of great solutions out there JMT has vetted hundreds of vendors to bring you best-in-class solutions for fund accounting, payroll, budgeting and forecasting, cemetery management, AP automation, document management, and a whole lot more. Really, at JMT, your mission is our business. Rest assured, everything that we're going to do is going to lead to better processes and greater efficiencies. How did we get our start? JMT was founded back in 1991 by a nonprofit finance professional, Jacqueline M. Tiso. Jackie was in her fourth role as a nonprofit finance person when she left and started JMT. She'd been a customer of a few software and technology implementations at the time and wasn't really overly thrilled as a customer in what she had experienced. Well, with her lifelong passion for nonprofits and with having been a customer who was less than pleased with the technology services she received, it was in that spirit that she founded JMT nearly 30 years ago. Now we have regional offices in Austin, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Patterson, New York. And it's no coincidence that MIP is headquartered right down the road here in Austin, and yes, the barbecue is better. Give me a sec. Here is a sampling of our clientele. Take a look around. You might see a theme here. Hopefully you do. They're all nonprofits, and they are all over the map when it comes to mission-driven activities. Of the thousands of organizations that we've served over the years, many of them are still active with us today. Approximately 250 of these are actually hosted in the cloud. Does this mean that the remaining, hundreds of organizations are housing their accounting software internally? Not necessarily. Many of them are using things like remote desktop or VPN to make remote connections to the company software. Hosting isn't for everyone. JMT can absolutely help you understand the requirements and help you determine which path you should take. And remember, at JMT, we put your needs first and help you find the best solution available. Here we can say that IT resources can be broken down into two categories, personnel and infrastructure. If we take a look at IT resources, we can say that personnel is all about who's keeping the lights on. Many nonprofits, smaller nonprofits, maybe under, if I was to give it a number, 5 million annual operating budget, have already elected to outsource our IT to a third party. Makes a lot of sense and allows the business to focus more on delivering the mission. Infrastructure is all about hardware and software, servers and Microsoft licensing, networking applications, data storage, support contracts. If you lack in any of these areas, your ability to work efficiently will be diminished by the inadequate tools that you're using. And some organizations do use software like remote desktop or VPN licenses to connect remotely. This would allow you to work from home, but there are drawbacks, there are limitations. You often hear about slowness or lags when using things like remote desktop or VPN. That goes back to the type of software and hardware that you're running internally. Goes back to those IT resources. There's also a ton of maintenance involved with these solutions. Now you're paying extra just in IT maintenance fees and overheads. More or all of these could be offset by migrating to the cloud. Last bullet we have up here, probably the most compelling reason to migrate is the paradigm shift. Your board has decided to outsource IT. It's happening a lot, and if it happens to you, you do have the option to invest in your own IT resources, or you can contact a service provider. Which is better for you? Well, don't select an IT consultant who doesn't have any experience with MIP or the other applications you use. This is something that would definitely lead to trouble. All right, I'm going to take a small break here and hand the presentation over to Tom.
It only takes me 5-10 seconds to figure out how to unmute myself. Dan, thanks so much for that intro, and I'm glad to be speaking with everybody today. My goal here is to really just kind of share information and give you an idea of what some things that you ought to be thinking about are that as you consider this leap, one of the questions that people often have is that, I know what this is something I want to do, but I don't really know where to begin or what questions to ask in order to make a good decision about how to move forward on things like this. So I've identified 5 things that you ought to take into consideration as you're contemplating this move. You may have made a decision I do want to take my MIP system outside of my own server room and have it hosted, but I don't know where to take it or who's the best choice to work with. And so, Dan, if you'll move to the next slide. The first thing that I would encourage you to think about is for any partner that you consider for hosting, you want to make sure they have certain things on their resume. Number one, have they been doing this for a while? Do they have a track record? Do they know and have a lot of experience hosting business applications like the ones that you use? And that's the reason I bring this up is that new hosting providers are popping up every day. There are literally thousands of companies in the US alone that would be willing to host your applications for you. Now, some of them are brand new, some of them are very small shops, some of them have no experience at all hosting applications like the ones that you use. And so you do need to ask these questions about their track record, how many customers they have, how long they've been around, and do they have any specialization. Secondly, MIP is a very specific type of business application. It's a mid-market client server application that runs on SQL Server. And so they have to be comfortable and experienced in supporting that kind of application. There's things from a reliability standpoint that are really important. And most managed hosting providers will have these if you ask for them. But what is their track record in the last 12 months as far as uptime compared to their service level agreement? Do they have any type of guarantees, or and does that guarantee involve any type of reduction in service costs if they fail to meet it? That's it's one thing to say, hey, we're up 99.9% of the time, but what if you aren't? Then what? What kinds of remedies are available to me as the customer? And and then once again, we always say, just like as people are considering working with JMT, we always say, when you work with anybody, see if they can give you references or testimonials or somebody who's like you that you can talk to that can validate some of the statements that they're making about the quality of service, their reliability, and their suitability for your mission. You want to move to the next one? The second area is really about scale and redundancy. And so, once again, we've got clients at JMT of all shapes and sizes, from very small organizations with one-person finance office to very, very large organizations that have 60, 70, 80 people who are interacting with the finance and back office systems every day. And so it really does make a difference, who you work with in terms of their ability to serve that variety of customer types. Questions you should be considering, how many customers in this industry do they serve? Do they have any type of vertical expertise with nonprofit or public sector companies? Secondly, do they have any experience hosting MIP specifically? Their geographic footprint is important, and I bring this up only in the case where they don't have a geographic footprint. In some cases, you'll talk to folks who don't actually have servers anywhere except for one rack and one data center. And so having a geographic footprint that's bigger than that, where there's redundancy geographically, is important just from a disaster recovery and scalability standpoint. Do they have the ability to grow quickly without their existing customers being impacted? There are certain questions that they need to be able to answer regarding their infrastructure. Do they have the physical security and environmental controls at the data center that will ensure that uptime guarantee is met? Do they have the ability to grow rapidly? If for whatever reason there's a big sea change in the MIP world and all the MIP users all decide to go out and host their application at the same time, can they absorb that? Do they have the ability to do that? And do they have a track record of responsiveness? Once again, this leads back to those references and testimonials. Do you have actual customers willing to attest to their ability to meet your needs and provide service? And finally is that as your needs change and as you grow, you may want to host more than just your MIP system in the cloud. Maybe there's related business systems that you want to be in the cloud side by side with your MIP for one reason or another, or you just want to get that last server decommissioned that's in your closet right now, that you want to get all of your business information systems in the cloud. Do they have the ability to handle those types of things, or are you stuck with just an MIP only hosting situation? Dan, you want to move to the next one? The third one is really a big deal for a lot of MIP users. Some of the people who were using the MIP private cloud service earlier this year were unfortunately impacted. In fact, JMT was one of those customers that was impacted by a malware, ransomware incident. And and this is happening a lot. All you have to do is watch the news and read the technology section and see that there's big companies all over the place that are being impacted by hackers and other nefarious actors out there in the world. So it is really, really important that you understand and can have confidence in the security and threat mitigation measures that are being taken by your partner. The security model, how they're designing their physical and software infrastructure. Do they have the ability to incorporate security measures such as multi-factor authentication, where it's not just a username and password, but there's a second layer of authentication through mobile device or some other method? Are they employing all the different hard and software firewall technologies, and are those modern and current? Are they encrypting data and making it more difficult for data to be intercepted, for instance, as it's being shared with you at your office or your home where you're working and the data center? Do they have measures in place to detect and prevent attacks, whether those are brute force attacks where people are using electronic means to try to hard test passwords and break in that way, or a distributed denial of service attack where there's an attempt made to take down a service for whatever reason. Those are things that savvy hosting partners have actual measures in place to mitigate and prevent. Other things that might be important to you: IP address restrictions so that people can only connect from certain locations, physical locations. And finally, just good old best practices. Are all the hardware and firmwares and software operating system patches and things like that being applied timely, so as security threats are identified in the marketplace, that those are addressed as quickly as possible. So these are really important things. I mentioned earlier, we had some of our clients who were on that other service who were down for a month or more. It had no access to anything. And so, once again, on the front end, making sure that the bad guys don't get in is super important. Next slide, Dan. So if they do get in, then what? This is the thing, is that, you hear about big companies, you think that have, 7-figure security budgets are still getting hacked. So this is possible. So then what? So you'll definitely want to ask questions about and understand, what is the data backup policy? If I had to roll back to a point in time before the system was compromised, what are my options? And is there ways for me to have access to my own data, to where I don't have to rely on my partner to keep track of it for me? Is there a way that I can have my database and the related files that I use in my MIP system available to me whenever I want? Is there an option for that? Once again, ransomware, malware mitigation is important. Understanding what their restore point objective is. And so this is a term, that we've come to know, once again, in response to this, some of the challenges that we had in the first quarter. This restore point objective means that if the system goes down, and I don't mean a little bit, I mean, it goes way down. It is out in their a meteor hits the data center where the data was being stored. how, do they have an objective for when they're going to be back online? Restore point objective. And so it's, for some organizations, this might be 24 hours, others it might be 2 hours. And it's important to understand what that is, because if your hosting provider has sufficient disaster recovery measures, geographic redundancy, replication of their data to other data centers in the event that one data center goes offline, it's possible for a whole data center to go down and for you to be working again within a few hours if they have the appropriate IT measures in place. So that implies a need for geographic redundancy, redundant equipment, and once again, they have to have 24/7, 365 support and people working on this outside of normal business hours. Dan, next slide. All right, so this is specific to you. So this webinar was for people who use MIP. And as Dan said, we've been working with MIP forever. And so, one thing that we've got down at JMT is that we're really very, very familiar with all of the nuances and specific idiosyncrasies of MIP and how it works and how it's installed and how it interacts with other applications and what you can do with SQL Server and what the data looks like and all those things. And so, once again, going with a host, like Dan said, who knows nothing about MIP and asking them to host your MIP application could work, but they're going to require that you be the subject matter expert on MIP. Going with a host that's purpose-driven to host MIP and who has resources available to help support you and your use of MIP is something I think that you really should give weight to. There's also a need in a lot of cases to customize the environment to support specific use cases for your MIP. And so you want to be able to have that flexibility. I bring this up because you may hear things about MIP Cloud from community brands. MIP Cloud is a cool product in a lot of ways, but it's not very configurable or customizable. And kind of what you get is what you get. It can't be integrated with other applications outside of the bill of price list. It's really, what you get is what you get. It's its own thing. And so if you have customization or integration requirements, it may not be the best fit for you. So, however, if you're going to go with a private hosted MIP implementation, to get those things done, you're going to want to work with somebody who's got familiarity with MIP and how it works in its operating environment. All right, next slide, Dan. All right, so all that being said, we went through with all that same criteria back in March and April this year and vetted a number of different hosting providers. And the reason for this is that we had clients who needed help and they needed it soon because of the disaster that was going on. And the partner that rose to the top of our list is Ace Cloud Hosting. And Ace Cloud Hosting is a household name in the QuickBooks and QuickBooks Enterprise world. However, they have extensive experience working with all kinds of small and medium-sized business application hosting. And so one of the things that we learned as we were vetting them is that they have an extremely high, good reputation for quality, performance, and reliability. And some of the comments that we got nearly immediately from our clients that we helped move onto the ACE platform was they couldn't believe how fast it was compared to what they were doing before. They do have a 99.9999, that's 4 nines to the right of the decimal point, uptime guarantee, meaning that if they fail to meet that, they start refunding your fees. And so they're very financially interested in you having access to your system all the time. They've got over 20,000 users in 40 countries. They, like I said, specialize in hosting business applications, accounting software. And so they really understand the use scenarios and what people are trying to do with applications like MIP. When it comes to infrastructure, all those things I listed off to you in terms of redundancy and quality and security measures and threat prevention and mitigation, disaster recovery, they've got the top marks in all those categories. They also have shown a tremendous amount of flexibility and willingness to customize environments for the unique needs of our clients. We've got clients who needed to do certain things on the SQL Server end that were outside of the MIP application. They wanted to do custom reporting through Access. They wanted to be able to use Crystal Reports. They wanted to be able to use other applications that are not part of the Community Brands software price list. And they've shown amazing flexibility to put together something custom that will work for the unique needs of a client. And probably the secret sauce to this whole thing is that this is a partnership between ACE and JMT. JMT is actively involved in every implementation on the host platform. We support those clients. We're the first line of support for you as your partner, so that you're not having to talk to a tech for the hosting provider who doesn't actually know anything about MIP. You're able to call us, and if it's an issue with the MIP, we can help you with that. If it's an issue with the hosting, we'll help you with that too. You don't have to have two numbers. You want to go to the next slide, Dan? So I just want to run through some kind of resume qualifications for these guys. It is really important they do. Some of you might have, are they SSAE 16 Type 2 certified? Are these data centers actually secure? Do they have all the physical and environmental stuff? And the answer is absolutely yes. They're in at least 7, possibly more. They're spinning up new sites all the time. Just in the US, 7 different data centers. They have available multi-factor authentication. You're not required to do that, but if you would like to do multi-factor authentication, that's an available option. I mentioned the uptime guarantee. I mentioned the real-time intrusion detection prevention team. This is people who are actually monitoring and intervening. Told a story, and it's, granted it's just a story, but they mentioned that they actually had a ransomware attack at their data center at one point, and they caught it in less than 3 minutes after it got into the system, isolated the server, had it completely disconnected and mitigated, within half an hour. And it's because they've got trained technicians security technicians whose job is to be on the lookout for anything like this. And they've set up their hardware and software infrastructure in that 6th bullet in the isolated environment. Each user is in their own isolated environment. So if another user on that same service makes a bad choice and clicks on a bad link and gets malware on their server, that doesn't affect the other customers because they're all compartmentalized. Finally, one other thing that we were able to work out with them that's really interesting to a lot of our MIP customers is that they say, I really just want to be able to hold my data. I want to have a copy of my data. I had a bad experience, and I just don't want to be at the mercy of my host and their whatever issues they're going through. I need to be able to have my data and go home if I want to. And so they have an optional service through iDrive, who you may have heard commercials for, who does offsite backup, where copies of your database and other related files can actually be synchronized to an offsite service that you have direct access to. And so that way, if for whatever reason, I don't think it would ever happen, but if for whatever reason you no longer had access to the service, you would still have your data. It would still be there for you to go get out of iDrive. So I think I might have one more slide, Dan. Let's see. I do have one more slide. So final questions I would encourage you to ask yourself. You've looked at MIP Cloud. You're looking at your on-premises version of MIP. You may say, you know what, I'm going to have to give up some things if I go to MIP Cloud. I can't, have this direct integration to this other piece of software that I have set up on site, or I need to do this custom thing that Community Brands doesn't want to support. Well, this is an option. Being in a private cloud also gives you greater control of the timing of upgrades. So if you don't want to take the new upgrade of MIP until you're ready, then you actually can synchronize that with your calendar as opposed to it happening just whenever it happens. You'll also have JMT supporting you both for your MIP and for the infrastructure piece. So you'll have a single phone number to call for any kind of MIP help or help related to the hosting of the MIP application. I mentioned additional applications. If you need to do custom things on your databases or on your SQL Server or integrations, honestly, this is we've moved, I think, nearly 30 MIP customers onto this service since April, and it's just been a tremendous success. And we have a huge amount of confidence in ACE and their long track record and their scale and their reputation for quality, and obviously with JMT doing the same for over 20 years. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dan, who's going to help us kind of wrap up this section, and then we're going to move to questions. So Dan, go ahead.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. So I'm going to talk about a couple of articles that I read recently. Forbes published an article earlier in July, which talked about how the pandemic has forced enterprises to adopt cloud technology more rapidly than they ever have before. The lesson learned, the benefits just simply outweigh the risks. There's a great quote from that article. Cloud computing has never been more important. It has already enabled companies to continue operating seamlessly when it was just 10, maybe 15 years ago that the pandemic would have easily brought business processes and productivity to a screeching halt. Marketplace, another article, was published just last week and talked about how companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google stand to benefit the most from these recent changes. When asked why, the authors highlighted a few key benefits that apply to organizations really of all sizes, not just enterprises. The first big benefit is the ability to scale your business, and Tom mentioned, you talked about that earlier. The use of public cloud means that you can scale your applications as needs dictate. So don't just think in terms of scaling out, but scaling back in as well. Flexibility was another key benefit. Migrating multiple applications to the cloud means that you need to find a way to make them communicate with each other, and that's a much easier task with the advent of cloud and its integration tool set. Another thing Marketplace pointed out was that some organizations have been reluctant to adopt cloud. Specifically, think financial services and government agencies. They have to prepare a bit more, but even they are starting to make significant strides towards cloud adoption. The best news of all, and this is how the article put it, and I think Tom and I can both agree that with all these competitors vying for your business, the cost of cloud overall, cloud services is actually decreasing. So speaking of cost, you may be wondering how hosting fees are determined. What are the variables? Are there upfront fees to consider? No, we don't think that this is going to blow your budget, but it wouldn't take long to know for sure. If you'd like to obtain a free quote, simply email us here at cam, that's C-A-M, at jmtconsulting.com. Email address is at the bottom of your screen. And we'll give you a few seconds to jot it down here. Once you email us, we'll have a few basic questions for you, and you should have what you need in no time at all. Cam, C-A-M, at jmtconsulting.com. So we're pretty much at the end of the presentation. What happens next? Well, unfortunately, we don't have any prizes to give out, but hopefully you did find some value in the information that you received today. There's also lots of potential in the pursuit of happiness, really your happiness. We suggest you pursue your interest and find a partner with a proven methodology who can help you find the right answers, a recipe for success, if you will. We think JMT has that recipe, but we'd like to help you, and we'd like to help you find your happy place too. I also want to let you know that our team will be contacting you next week to talk about this webinar. Why did you register? What were your expectations? How will you use this information? Where do you go from here? We're happy and we thank you for joining us today, and we want to be with you there in the future. Let's open it up for questions and answers. Kim, can you hop back on and let us know what's going on in the chat or Q&A, or what are we seeing?
Absolutely. So thank you, Tom and Dan. And if you guys have any questions for them, send it through the Q&A tab at the bottom of your control panel. Let's see. So far, we don't have any questions come through, so we'll just give it a minute. And in the meantime, maybe you guys could answer about the difference between JMT and ACE and the MIP private cloud from Community Brands.
So I'll take that one. So the JMT or the private cloud from Community Brands is actually a brand new product. And the reason I say that is it's kind of like the phoenix rising from the flames of their old private cloud product that literally went up in flames back in March. And so they're still kind of finding their way. They're launching their new service on Amazon Web Services, and there's still a lot of restrictions around it. There's things that they just simply aren't willing to do for customers because they're still new at this. So they're new infrastructure, new technology, and not a lot of customers on the service yet. So we couldn't wait for them to figure all that out, which is part of the reason that we went out and found this new service. So what I would say is that it's still kind of early to tell exactly what that service from Community Brands is going to look like long term. For a while, they weren't even signing up customers because they were still getting the infrastructure worked out. So it's very, very difficult to say because of all the reasons I just stated. They're not sharing a ton of information about exactly how they do things. So we're going to watch it, and I'm not going to say that it's not a good service. I assume they're kind of learned an awful lot from the bad experience that they had, and are putting a lot of good things in place. But at the same time, they're a software company, and they're not a hosting service. That's not their core business. And so we made the determination that saying, let's partner with somebody whose mission in life and whose existential purpose is to provide quality hosting. And let's partner with them, and then we can bring the expertise with the business applications that are being hosted. That's the approach that we're taking.
Great, thank you, Tom. So Anonymous wants to know, how long would it take to set up and move to our MIP to the cloud?
That's an excellent question, and the answer is that if you ask the folks at ACE, they say we can have your server up in 4 hours, which is a little bit misleading. And so what I'll tell you is that we're telling folks that it's potentially as quick as 24 hours. And the reason that I say 24 hours is that as long as all of the preparation work is done, in other words, we've got a copy of your database and all of the information that's necessary for setting up your users and all that other stuff, then it really can be done, the next day. Like ACE promises, they can have the servers provisioned and ready to go in a few hours. The one important piece that adds some time to that is that any data that comes onto ACE's servers has to go through a security scan. And so that includes your MIP backup and any files that are part of your MIP share, anything like that. And so that security scan process to make sure that it's free of viruses and malware and anything else is very important, but it's a little bit time consuming. Once those files have been scanned and validated, then the JMT support team will then make sure that the data is restored, get the user set up, test the system, make sure that it appears to be working, get a key person from your team to connect to the service, make sure that you can log in, make sure everything's where you expected to find it, and then you're good to go. So it really can be next day. from the time that you sign the contract and provide the information.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. And to Dan, we had Anonymous also said ditto to the previous question. And what kind of prizes were you talking about?
I didn't have anything in mind, but maybe we can give away some masks. I'm not quite sure.
Masks are super popular these days, so.
I think we have a lot of JMT hand sanitizer.
Yes, we do.
Great. Well, there is no more questions in the queue right now. So I think we could wrap it up now. So if you guys had any final remarks.
Just want to say thanks to everybody who came out, and I encourage you to chat with our team when they give you a call.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for joining us today. We do hope that you got a lot of good information out of this. If you want to continue the conversation, just email us at cam@jmtconsulting.com. That goes to a team box, and either myself or someone else on our team will reach back out to you, deliver the information that you need. You know, we talked a lot about MIP. We mentioned third-party applications, you know, things like Microi and Team NFP and Drill Point and all these things. They have their own requirements, and so let's have that conversation, and it just begins with an email. So again, thank you for joining us, and don't hesitate to reach out.
Great. Well, while you were talking, a question did come through. So Roman would like to know what the interface looks like when you log into MIP.
Great. So great question. And so the interface looks exactly like running MIP from your desktop. They actually use a version of remote desktop technology, which means that you'll actually be connecting to a hosted desktop where you'll have a desktop with all the icons, including MIP and other things. The environment includes a licensed version of Excel. So all the functionality that you expect related to exporting to Excel and working with Excel documents works just as well in the hosted environment. You can copy and paste documents back and forth, or drag and drop from the hosted desktop to your local desktop. So it's very much, anybody who's used a remote desktop technology before, it'll be very, very familiar to you.
Yeah, there's really no learning curve. You're just hitting different buttons to get into MIP. You're not trying to learn a new interface, or you know, don't expect any changes in the way that MIP looks, feels, behaves.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining JMT Consulting for this webinar today. And thank you, Dan and Tom, for your time. And we hope you all enjoyed the presentation and learned something. And if this is something that you're open to learning more about as it relates to your organization, we'd love to meet with you individually. Be on the lookout for an email where you can schedule a one-on-one meeting with Dan. And we'd also love for you to join us at future events and webinars, which you can find by visiting our website, jmtconsulting.com, and clicking on the Training and Events tab. And this will conclude our webinar today. So I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.